Hi guys, this is Kumar. Today we are going to learn about genetics in this podcast. That's a hard topic, but I would like to simplify by first learning some of the vocabulary word to understand this topic. Before we do that, let's have a look at this picture. If these two guys are going to get married, what is their son going to be looking like? So might be something like this. Or if these two guys get married, their daughter is going to look like this. So what's common between this picture and this, or this picture and this? So one of the things you can say is that their facial looks look similar to their parents. So why is that so? Or in what ways you are similar to your parents or sibling? Or in what ways you are different? This question has been studied more than 2000 years ago, but it came up with some modern way or ideas by some research given by a monk named Gregor Mendel. And Mendel demonstrated that inheritance followed particular patterns. He used the pea plants and crossbred them to see which trait passed on, which didn't. And a framework was given by him for understanding how traits actually get passed from one generation to other. So we are going to talk about classical genetics and how the traits are passed along from parents to children. So the first vocabulary word which comes into your mind is trait. So people in a family may have things in common, they can share traits, and you can inherit traits from your parents. That you know for sure. But there are two words which I would like to explain here is one that is trait and the second one is inherit. So what are traits? Traits can be something like eye color, hair color, skin color, or body shape. So these are some of the traits which you inherit from your parents. Like it is almost similar in some of the siblings because they have been inheriting these features or the traits from their parents. So what is inheritance or heredity? It's the passing of traits from one parent to the offsprings. And now I'm going to use the word offsprings because offspring is another name for the children of a male and a female parent. So the first vocabulary word which comes is traits. So traits are the features or the characteristics which are passed from one generation to the other. And now comes the definition of genetics. What's genetics? That is the study of how traits are passed from one parent to other or to the offsprings. It's called as genetics. So the traits can be different if you can roll your tongue or the dimple in your cheeks or how your chin look like and what the color of your hairs. So these are some of the traits which are passed from the parents to the other offsprings. Now the question comes why these traits are passed from the one parent to the other. So we are going to find the answer for this question in this video. So before we do the traits are determined by the genes on the chromosome. If you remember the word genes, these genes are the segment of the on the DNA that determines the traits, or these part of the DNA on which there are the codes for the proteins. So that part which are having a specific code for a specific trait, that part on the chromosome is called as genes. So let's look at this picture. So this is a chromosome. And if you unwind this chromosome, it will come into a DNA. And if you look at a part of DNA, suppose this part has the code for a protein, and that protein is going to give you the eye color. So this part is going to be the genes, or all those codes which are in this section of the chromosome which are going to code for eye color are genes. And if you go further, this DNA will have another part of the chromosome having the codes for those protein which are going to make your hair color. So these are going to be gene 1 and gene 2. So now you are good with the word genes, which are a segment on DNA that determines the trait. Now, just repeating the same thing, what is genes? Genes are the material that controls each trait, which are expressed in an organism in the form of the various features like hair color, eye color, or the different features which you are inheriting from your parents. So genes also come in pairs. An offspring inherits one copy of each genes from each parent. Talking about chromosomes, chromosomes comes in homologous pairs. So thus genes are also come in pairs. What are homologous pairs? So the homologous pairs are the chromosomes are also called as homologs, are set of one maternal that comes from your mother and one paternal that comes your father. And these chromosomes, they pair up with each other inside the cell during meiosis. And also these homologous have the same genes in the same loci. So loci means the same location. If you look at these two chromosomes, suppose this is coming from your father and this is coming from your mother, they will be having the genes for, let's take example of the eye color, on the same location. So every gene is in pair, and these genes are on the pairing chromosome, which are called as homologous chromosomes. So one set coming from your dad, that is 23 in sperm, and one set coming from your mother, that is 23 in your egg. They fuse together, they come together in the zygote, and they pair up according to the size and the location of the genes on their arms, so which are also called as loci. So these are homologous chromosomes are having a pair of genes on the same location. So let's talk about alleles. So what are alleles? Alleles are the different genes or the possibilities. So if I'm talking about possibilities, that means I'm talking about the traits, like if your mother was having a blue eye and your dad was having a black eye, these are the two types of possibility you are going to have. And it's going to be for the same trait. That is, I'm talking about the eye color. So alleles are the different genes for the same trait. There are two types of genes. One is dominant and another one is recessive. So what is a dominant genes? Dominant genes are that prevents the other genes from showing up. And recessive is the genes that does not show even though it is present. So these two genes are represented by an alphabet letter. So the dominant genes are the uppercase letter and the recessive genes are the lowercase letter. So let's take in the calves, the dominant color is black and recessive color is albino. Let's take an example of the straight thumb as a dominant and hitchhiker thumb as recessive. So the straight thumb, which will be represented by the letter T, and the hitchhiker thumb is going to be represented by a lowercase t. So one thing always you have to remember, that you have to use the same letter for the same alleles. So if you're talking about the hitchhiker and the straight thumb, for the straight thumb you cannot use S, or hitchhiker you cannot use H. So for both the alleles you have to use the same alphabet or the letter. So for dominant you have to use uppercase, and for recessive you have to use a lowercase. So let's take an example of straight thumb. There can be two possibilities of the alleles. That is, if there will be two dominant alleles which will be represented by the capital T and T, and there can be a straight thumb, which is because the straight thumb is dominant, it can have one dominant, that is T, and the other one is recessive, that is a lowercase t. In both the cases, it's going to have a straight thumb. Let's see a hitchhiker thumb. So to have a hitchhiker thumb as a shown character, you have to have a lowercase t's, or that is a recessive, two alleles with recessive character, that is T and T. So you must have two recessive alleles for a recessive trait to show up in the offsprings. So that's the importance of alleles. And let's talk about homozygous and heterozygous. So both genes of pair are the same. They are called as homozygous or the purebred. And in that case, it is going to have two capital T, that is dominant one. And if there is a recessive which shows up, it is going to be homozygous with the two lowercase alleles. So one dominant and one recessive, how it's going to show? It's going to be capital T and a lowercase t, which will be a heterozygous. So just to repeat that, a homozygous is when it is having a dominant, then it is going to have a T and T, that is the capital. And if it is recessive and it is homozygous, then it's going to be T and T. So in both cases, if we are talking about a straight thumb, this is going to be a straight thumb, and this is going to be a hitchhiker thumb. But if it shows a heterozygous or a hybrid, then one allele is going to be dominant and one is going to be recessive. So let's take an example of the puppies. So if the puppy is black with a homozygous, it's going to be B and B. And in case if it is still a black, but there is another possibility that it can have a B, which is a dominant, and a recessive, but it will show a black color because there is a dominant allele present. Let's look at the white with their genes. If there is a white is recessive, to show up in it the offspring, it has to be a homozygous with B and B. So B and B is going to be a white when it is going to be a homozygous recessive. So in this, to show a black, it can be a homozygous dominant or a heterozygous because the black is a dominant. So what are genotype and phenotype? Genotype is the combination of genes an organism has, that what genes you are going to have, the actual gene, and what is like T and T, or these alphabet are the genotype. And what are their physical appearance due to these genes, which are called as a phenotypes, or physical appearance resulting from gene makeup is a phenotype, like hitchhiker thumb or a straight thumb. Alright, some fun facts. Two individuals share as much as 99.9% of the same genetic material, and they differ in only 0.1% of it. So the person who is sitting next to you is similar to you in 99.9% because he or she is having the same genetic material. And talking about the same genetic material or the genetic similarity, people share 7% of the genetic material with E. coli bacteria, 21% with worms, 90% with mice, 98% with chimpanzee. And don't forget the bananas. You share 50% of the genetic makeup with a banana. So I'm going to talk about Punnett square in the next video. Till then, bye-bye.